Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back once again to our ongoing series on the glories of our most beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. But first, Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, today we're continuing with our mini-series on Stimulation for Ecstatic Love, and this will be part 19. To begin with, Krishna's playground Vrindavan exists simply for the pleasure of the divine couple, Shri Radha and Krishna. All the residents of Vrindavan, including even the sun, the moon, the river Jamuna, Govardhan Hill, all the trees, etc., are all serving Radha and Krishna to the best of their abilities. Now, in Krishna consciousness, there are actually two types of services mentioned by different acharyas. One is called Tat Sukha Seva, and the other is Sva Sukha Seva. In Tat Sukha Seva, a devotee always serves Krishna according to Krishna's desire. And in Svashuka Seva, a devotee serves Krishna in the way that he wants to serve Krishna. And there's a big difference between these two types of services. In Braja, all the residents serve in the mood of Tat Shuka Seva, like serving the master according to his needs and desires, and not according to one's personal desires. And Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada writes very nicely in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in this regard, Anjabilasita Shunyam Jnana Karmad Yanavritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilana Bhakta Uttama. Very famous verse. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy, and fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So, such devotees are known as Seva Vyasani. Seva Vyasani. In Sanskrit, the word Vyasan means literally addiction. And when we think of addiction, we generally think of it in terms of bad addictions. But Seva Vyasana is used in a good sense, meaning addiction for the selfless service of Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. The devotees are addicted in a good sense, the best sense, the very best sense, to service to Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Now, there's a famous bird. This class is, again, going to be about birds, probably our last class on birds, but there's a famous bird in Vrindavan who's addicted to holding a twig or a small stick in its feet, even when flying. Sitting in a tree or flying, this particular bird always has a little twig clutched in its feet, even when it's flying in the air, which our acharyas compare to the Brajabasis' strong addiction to serving Radha and Krishna. This bird is the Hariyal bird, or the in English we know him as the yellow-footed green pigeon. Very beautiful bird. This bird is still seen everywhere around Vrindavan. It has a yellow, greenish color with blackish-gray colored wings. And it always flies very high in the sky, and it loves to sit on the higher branches of tall trees like a banyan or kadamba tree. That's where you'll see them, on tops of trees. And as I mentioned, a peculiar feature of this bird is that it's always holding a twig from the tree in its feet. In fact, it's never seen without such a twig in its grip. And it holds that twig very tight. In Vrindavan, they say that no one in the entire creation of Lord Brahma can take that branch, can take that twig from the grip of a Hariyal bird. Also, it's interesting that while residing in tall trees, the Hariyal bird never ever comes down to the ground. It always stays in the trees. Eating leaves and fruits and tender sprouts. Sometimes you see birds, they hop from the tree down to the ground to get something to eat. Not this bird. It even drinks water up in the trees. Doesn't come down to drink from ponds or reservoirs. Whenever raindrops fall or dew settles on the leaves of the tree, the Hariel bird drinks that water only. Now, because it never comes down to the ground in search of food or water, it remains safe from animals who prey on birds, you could say on the ground or on the banks of water bodies. Therefore, generally, I was reading, the Hariel bird lives a long life. Some estimates say they live up to 24 years. And when it finally dies and finally falls to the ground, it's very interesting. It's always found still clutching that twig in its feet. Therefore, our acharyas often compare a sincere devotee who remains steadfast in doing seva, in service, and who never gives up doing that service, even up to the point of death, to the Hariel bird, who always maintains a strong hold on the twig of a tree. And the acharyas say that just as the Hariel bird never comes down to the ground, but always remains, you could say, in an elevated position in the trees, so an advanced or elevated devotee always remains above material desires by tasting the higher pleasure of hearing and chanting about Krishna. So wonderful. So in this regard, the poet Surdas expresses the gopis' love for Krishna in that same mood, steadfastness. He writes, as the gopis are speaking, O Uddhava, Hare Krishna is for us like the twig of a tree for the Hariel birds. Our hearts, actions, and words are only meant to serve Krishna and hold Krishna firmly in our souls. In sleep, in consciousness, and in unconscious states, we always chant the names of Krishna. Hearing the message of yoga, as you have spoken to us, feels like a bitter gourd to us. You are giving us this disease of yoga, which we have never performed or even heard about. So there we hear about the steadfastness of the gopis' love for Krishna. Now, another bird, got a couple of birds today, 3 birds actually. Another bird is the surkaba bird, known in Western countries as the golden pheasant, So this surkaba bird, it's very shy and often very difficult to see or spot. And in Vrindavan, the feather of a surkaba bird is sometimes used as an analogy while referring to one who is very beautiful. Someone with a golden complexion, surkab ke pank. And the best example of that, of course, is Vrindavan Ishwari, Srimati Radharani, who has a beautiful golden complexion. Therefore, Krishna wears the feather of the surkab bird, the golden pheasant, in his apparel, like mainly on his clothes, to always remind him of Srimati Radharani. So sweet. So it appears Krishna not only wears a peacock feather, but a golden pheasant feather as well. Actually, I was reading that he often wears a combination of different feathers from different birds. But the combination of feathers on his crown or in his hair is only from birds who are friendly towards each other. A pheasant's feather is never found in his crown like a peacock feather is, because these two birds, they tend to fight with each other. But the feather of a swan can be combined with the peacock feather in his crown, because these two birds are very friendly to each other. Swans and peacocks. This is, when I thought about it, this is the science of shringar, or dressing and ornamenting the Lord. We can listen carefully because, well, one day by Srila Prabhupada's grace, we'll be back home in the spiritual world. We may be asked to decorate Krishnas, who, we learn something here. Don't mix the feathers, put the feathers in the proper place in Krishna's transcendental form. Actually, in this regard, we're all being taught this science by our spiritual masters. There's that beautiful verse in the Guru Vashtakam. Quote, "The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, cleanse their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master, Shringar, with feathers." So now I also read that the Surakab, the golden pheasant, actually has a boon from Kuvera, the demigod Kuvera, that whoever sees this bird will never experience poverty in life. Therefore, in Braja, in the olden days, ladies used to keep a feather of the Surkar bird in their safes and in their gold jewelry boxes. They keep a feather there. Another interesting point is that the male and female Surkar birds live in pairs, like married couples, and never separate or even mate with other Surkar birds. Rather, they always remain as one couple. Now, devotee scholars compare the loyalty of these birds to each other to the loyalty of devotees who serve only Krishna and never the demigods. They use the term Ek Devo Upasana, meaning devotees worship only Krishna and remain loyal and dedicated to him throughout life, just as a couple of Surkar birds remain dedicated to each other for life. Such a beautiful analogy. Now, the importance of worshipping only Krishna. It's stated in Padma Purana. I was reading, I also found some verses in Skanda Purana, but I would like to quote one shloka from the Gita Mahatmya, which Prabhupada quoted, the Gita Mahatmya, verse 7 by Sripad Shankaracharya in this regard. He wrote, Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam, Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva, Eko Mantras Tasya Namani Yani, Karmap Yekam Tasya Devasya Sheva. Quote, "There need be only one holy scripture, the divine Gita, sung by Lord Sri Krishna. Only one worshipable Lord, Lord Sri Krishna. Only one mantra, his holy names, and only one duty, devotional service unto that supreme worshipable Lord, Sri Krishna." Wow. So in this way, the Surkar bird of Braj, you could say, demonstrates the philosophy of unalloyed devotion to Krishna throughout one's life. Therefore, we once again can conclude that everything in Braj, even the birds, are exalted. Everything's exalted. Now, one last bird is the Chirraya, or it's known as the Indian sparrow, but I like Chirraya, the Sanskrit verses, the Sanskrit words for these birds and animals, etc. Now, this bird is very small in size, and it has a black and brown color to it. And these birds live in large groups together in trees, and it's described their chirping sounds fill the whole of Braja with their wonderful singing. Now, our acharyas compare them to devotees who live in the association of one another in communities, and by their singing fill such places with the divine names of Radha and Krishna, spreading auspiciousness everywhere. Another nice analogy. So Prabhus, with this, we will conclude our series on the birds of Vrindavan and how they help to stimulate our love for Radha and Krishna. I really enjoyed this particular series about the birds. And we'll end today with several verses from Shri Vrindavan Mahimamrita Shataka, Shataka 1 by Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, one of our very dear heroes. He writes, "Meditate on wonderful Vrindavan, where there are millions of lakes, ponds, and wells, all filled with water as sweet as transcendental nectar, where there are many gardens filled with blossoming transcendental flowers and fruits, and unlimited wonderful trees and vines, where there are numberless transcendental deer and other animals who move here and there, and where there are many beautiful transcendental groves. Whose heart would not be enchanted by Vrindavan, where Shri Radhika, Madan Mohan enjoy many pastimes, where there are many trees and flowering vines, where the ground is paved with jewels, and where the birds, deer, and other animals are all maddened with transcendental bliss. I meditate on Vrindavan, where the cuckoos sing the fifth note, the flute plays splendid melodies, peacocks sing and dance. Vines and trees bloom. Splendid and charming forests are all wonderful with many birds and deer, and there are many splendid lakes, streams and hills. Oh, look at Vrindavan, so beautiful with many blissful, splendid groves of kalpavriksha trees, with many parrots and other birds intoxicated by singing Vedic hymns glorifying Krishna, where many deer who are so pleasing to Krishna are there with amongst these splendid transcendental lakes, ponds and streams, all filled with water sweet as nectar and with mountains of valuable jewels. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati ki jai, Srila Prabhupada, the revealer of the Dham ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. A little bit short today, but that's all the words I could find that were explained in our Vedic literatures by the Goswamis, etc. So I hope you enjoyed this series. I really enjoyed it myself, and we'll find another stimuli to speak about next Friday. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, all the birds of Vrindavan ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Maya Purnama ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam.